It's August. That means it's fantasy football draft season. Yes, it is upon us. I'm Michael Fabiano, senior fantasy analyst over at Sports Illustrated Fantasy. And during your research for your fantasy football drafts, I'm sure you've heard the term game script. It's positive, negative, or neutral. Now, I looked back at 2020 stats to find out how game script negatively or positively affected the running back position. And we're going to start off with Derrick Henry, who was one of the top running backs in fantasy football last season, rushed for over 2,000 yards, one of the few guys to do that in the NFL. And he is now considered one of the 5 or 6 top picks overall from a fantasy football perspective. Here's something interesting, though, that you might not know about Henry. He averaged 24.8 points per game in 11 wins for the Titans. In 5 losses, he averaged 12 points, folks. His average in losses ranked outside of the top 20 among fantasy running backs, and I think that's notable. This is also a running back who is going to see regression almost guaranteed. 2,000-yard rushers almost always see some level of regression in the rushing yards department. Keep that in mind. Also, another thing to keep in mind, that Henry averaged nearly 7 more carries per game when the Titans won. That's probably not a surprise. Right now, Tennessee's over-under 9.5, so they're considered to be somewhere in the neighborhood of a 500 team, maybe a little bit better. Right? They do have some changes, though. Keep in mind, Arthur Smith no longer in the mix. He is now the head coach in Atlanta. The Titans also have the 13th most difficult schedule based on 2020 win percentages. So I do think regression is coming. And in games where the Titans might be facing a superior team, you have to play Henry. You might want to temper your expectations. Another player who we should be tempering expectations on is Josh Jacobs. He was the RB8 last year. He put up very good numbers, but he was also very unreliable when the Raiders lost games. Keep this in mind. In the games that Las Vegas won, 21.3 points per game. That's solid. That's elite. In the games that Jacobs and the Raiders lost, 10.3 points per game. The Raiders are considered a team that is probably going to be somewhere around 500. Their over-under is at 7.5. Also, keep this in mind. They added Kenyon Drake to this backfield, which means what? Fewer opportunities, maybe in the pass-catching department, mostly for Josh Jacobs. Vegas also has the 8th hardest schedule in the National Football League. So Josh Jacobs has gone from a potential first-round pick maybe 2 or 3 months ago before the Raiders went out and got Drake to now a player you're probably going to get in the 4th round as an RB2. And when the Raiders play superior opponents, well, Jacobs is unlikely to be very reliable, at least based on last season's data. You can find all of the information on many more running backs in my article, si.com/fantasy. I've done quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. You can find that and much more, because here at SI, we want to help you dominate your fantasy football drafts. Just go to si.com/fantasy.